I'd rather create something that others criticize than create nothing and criticize others.
If you have high quality product behind the bar, it's like weapon.
It's not about the figures. It's about who those figures are.
The Hospopreneurs Podcast.
I'm going to drink this beer.
Yeah, let's crack them.
With James Henderson.
Hello and welcome to episode 45 of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. Raihaan and I get into the story behind the bean, his journey to work with some of the biggest names in Australian coffee, and what it means to trade the fruit behind the Devil's Cup. Grab your pen and strap in. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the show, Ray.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No worries at all, mate. No worries at all. The first question that I like to ask to start the show is what your crazy hospitality story is.
There's a lot that comes to mind. How much time have you got?
Mate.
One that stands out for me is, I think, back in the early days when I had just started working as a barista. I was at a cafe in Harbour Town. It was raining. It was cold, middle of winter. We had a queue out the door. It was mad, and there were just two of us on the bar, myself and one other guy. He was a trainee, and he was fiddling with a cream canister.
Yep.
And in the middle of this mad rush, what do you think happened?
Oh, no.
This thing goes off.
Yep.
The cream goes everywhere. Uh-oh. Every single customer in the line cops it.
Sprayed, yeah. Oh, wow.
Everyone erupts in this massive applause because it was effectively snowing in the cafe.
Wow. Yeah. Oh man. So how'd you deal with that? What happened?
Well, I think
coffee's on us. Sorry guys.
We were just like, everyone, come in, pass around some napkins. Sorry about that. But we like to be really engaging, so we were in the middle of chat anyway.
Yeah.
And then interesting for everyone.
Yeah, but then everyone bonds over that experience.
Yeah, they were like, wow, snow, and it's cold, white Christmas in July.
What's funny is that something similar came up with Nick Pinn's episode, where he said that it started dripping through the ceiling in this bad storm in the restaurant, and it actually ended up bringing patrons together. So, people are sharing the same table, sort of eating beside each other, or sitting on the stairs, all these things. It's crazy that, this can also be a positive experience and really bond people.
That can go so badly as well if you don't handle it right. Well, you got to make good of it and help customers understand and just be cool about it. And, people understand. Human beings understand.
What does, this could be a big one. We won't get too carried away with it, but what does authenticity mean to you? You just brought that up there.
I wish I could take credit for this, but someone else told me that it's really, authenticity isn't something that you show when things are going good. It's something that you show when things go wrong. And it's how you deal with those situations. Do you show genuine regret? Do you show genuine concern? Do you show a genuine regard for the other human being who something has happened to? And that's authenticity.
So it doesn't have to be when things go wrong with you. It could be wrong with someone else.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you get to show who you really are. And it's in those testing situations where that happens.
So while we're on that sort of macro way of thinking, I want to ask you, Ray, why do you do what you do?
So I'm in coffee. I love coffee, and I really believe in the strength that coffee has to reach a lot of people. It has a depth in people's lives, which when you remove it, then people realize, coffee means so much to me. You know what I mean? And because of that strength that it has to influence and affect people, I love sharing my love for coffee with others so that they can share it with others. And hopefully we make the world go around a little bit better.
Yeah. What is it about that on a deeper level that really inspires you with coffee? It sounds like coffee is a tool for something else.
Some people really love the science and the geekiness behind coffee. I love more so the fact that coffee has changed the world. In Brazil, coffee built roads, coffee built ports. Coffee has arguably started the French Revolution and, was a part in the industrialization of Britain. Coffee has always been there and has provided a place where people get together, discuss ideas, and ultimately change our world.
What do you think about the coffee house culture? Do you think that it's dead? Or do you think that there are pockets where it's still alive, or whether it's thriving?
I think it's evolving. I don't think it is what it used to be, but I shouldn't harp on the past. We should look to what it's going to become in the future. and what influence we can have on people's lives going forward. Coffee houses and cafes are everywhere now. What they have in our lives is meeting places just for people to get quick caffeinated, but also to enjoy an experience and a break from their world. Because people's lives are so busy now. Everyone's up to here with life, work, children, whatever it is. Quick coffee break, refresh, reset. And I think that's, where the future of cafes might be going, providing this little vacation in the middle of the day. You know what I mean?
Well, we'll dive into the future of the industry a little bit later on, and
Yeah.
not just coffee, but hospitality more broadly.
Yeah.
But first, I want to ask you what you do.
So right now, I work for International Coffee Traders. We're a green bean coffee supply company, but that's only one part of what we do. The team is made up of 4 incredible professionals, all with our own skills and expertise. Whereas most coffee supply companies just provide coffee, green coffee to roasters. The team that I work with, we provide everything. Support for roasters, support for cafes, access to equipment, access to business knowledge. So if, for example, you need help starting a wholesale business in coffee, we can provide you with the expertise and the knowledge to get that going. Or if you want to develop roast profiles to really get the best flavor out of your roasted coffee, we're there because we have the experience and the know-how from the years that we've done in those roles.
So when you're building that sort of team, you said there's 4 of you. How do you go about selecting who's going to be in the team and what knowledge bases you need to cover and who's in your team?
The team is headed up by Philip DeBella. He's well known for building one of the most successful coffee companies in Australia out of nothing. So he brings all the business expertise, the knowledge, the innovation stuff. Then we have Moshe Tawil. He's our green bean buyer, and he's the guy who has connections all over the world with farmers and with trade organizations. He has an incredible mind for economics and how trade patterns work in the world, foreign currency fluctuation. He's managing all of that kind of stuff that goes with international trade. Then there's Michael Anapo, who has a background in cafes, hospitality. He owned his own technical servicing company for coffee machines. So he has incredible technical expertise. He's installed all kinds of coffee roasters around the country. So his expertise is really around logistics, transport, machinery, and of course coffee. And then myself. I'm new to the team. I've just started, but I bring roasting expertise, competition experience, and all the front of house cafe business kind of knowledge. So we cover top to bottom everything that someone in the cafe industry or roasting needs to know.
So if we move deeper into a little bit about your experience, about maybe barista comps that you've done, let's start there. So tell us a bit about even the process for those in other areas of hospitality who aren't familiar with coffee. How do you get involved in a barista comp or find them? Or even maybe there are people who are in coffee who are wondering, how do I compete? Or what's available? And what are the different types of competitions?
Okay, let me start off by saying that the barista community in Queensland is amazing. If you know a barista that's competed, almost all of us are happy to talk about our experiences and share that. There's 2 types of competitions that exist: formal and informal competitions. The formal ones are organized by the Australian Specialty Coffee Association. So they'll have a regional heat, one in Queensland, one in Sydney, one in Western Australia, so on. The winners from those heats go through to a national final, and there's different disciplines for each one. There's a barista competition, a latte art competition, a brewing competition, and a cup tasters. And I think there's roasting's been introduced as well now. So those are the formal competitions, and those are the most prestigious competitions. You have to pay to get into them. It requires incredible amounts of training, and you need support from a team around you and the business backing. It's like Formula One. You know what I mean? You don't go into it with your car. You just don't do it.
Yeah.
The informal competitions, these are like little latte art smackdowns that are held at a cafe.
Yeah, cool.
Or little brewing smackdowns. These are more community-focused, fun competitions. And these are probably a great way to just dip your toe into competitions before thinking about the formal competitions.
Yes.
Both have their value and both have their benefits. For example, like the community ones, like a latte art competition, there's just a predetermined cafe that will hold it. There might be some prize money involved, but to be honest, sometimes the judges are a little bit drunk. It's more fun, you know what I mean? And no one really cares whether they win or lose.
Yep.
The amount of preparation you need is very little. You just show up with a milk jug and pour some latte art.
Fantastic.
And if you beat the other guy, you can smack talk, you can do whatever you want. The formal competitions are really more like doing a master's degree in your chosen field. There's a lot of learning and education that needs to go into that endeavor.
In booze, it's similar that there are informal comps that we have more locally, and then larger, more formal ones run through a lot of distributors. What about Australia-wide? You said the Queensland community is great. What about Australia-wide or in other areas, or even internationally, if you've experienced internationally?
Other parts of Australia have their challenges. Sydney, for example, is so huge, it's hard to engage the entire barista community in Sydney because, you know, you might hold an event in one location, but it's an hour and a half from the other side of the city to get there. So it's a bit more pocketed and a bit more fragmented that way. But the level of competition is not any less in other cities. Australia definitely is leading the way in terms of frequency of events and the quality of competitors that goes into it. I dare say America would be similar, but America's the same. It's also very vast and very big.
So obviously competing in these events and getting involved heavily in the industry, you've met a crazy number of people. Have you felt that being involved in coffee has done that specifically? Or is it hospitality, or is it your personality, or what is it that's really facilitated that explosion of your network?
It's a combination of who I chose to surround myself with and who I chose to irritate for information. And also, I guess just doing the yards, you know, consistency is better than intensity. Every week or every other week, whenever there's events on, I would go to them. And not just talk to the people I knew, but talk to the people I didn't know. Hey, how's it going? My name's Ray. This is what I do. What do you do? Just going through that process, you meet so many people because they're all there for the same reason. Everyone's there to meet other people. No one's there to stand in a corner and be lonely. You know what I mean? We come to a community event to be with our community.
Yes.
So everyone's happy to talk and engage and be friendly. And you meet a lot of people doing that. And I've been lucky enough to work for people like Philip DeBella, who are incredibly motivated and incredibly successful. You know, you can't be in a situation like that and not learn something. You know, and the amount of learning that I've got from that, I'm very grateful for.
Is Phil a bit of a mentor of yours? Because he's come up a couple of times. Is he someone that you really look to learn from? And what is it that you feel like you've really learned from someone like Phil?
With Phil, he's an incredible person because everyone knows about his success. But he's just like you and I. He started off with nothing and with just a vision of what he wanted to do. You know, he took this idea and he ran with it. It was his dream. It was his passion. He went for it, and people told him that he would never be successful doing it. But he proved them wrong, and I really admire the tenacity that he had. He's also incredibly empathetic. Like, he's really good at reading people and understanding what their motivations are and what makes them tick and how to communicate with them. So the way he talks to me is different from the way he talks to Moshe or to Michael, because he's just so good at understanding people, and that's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned from him.
Being able to be that chameleon and adapt to your audience or the person that you communicate, is that, I'm trying to summarize that. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, in a sense, but he's so good at it, you know, and I aspire to be as good as that. And not just in the sense of, okay, I'm cold reading someone and this is how I need to communicate with them, but he genuinely engages with people.
I want to ask you, Ray, what are you learning about or exploring at the moment?
Right now, my focus is on really understanding international trade and how coffee actually moves from a farm to Australia and how it gets here. And it's incredible how involved the process is.
Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so every country has its own challenges. Let's take, for instance, Ethiopia. Generally, in Ethiopia, there's a bunch of small farmers. They cooperate together, they put their coffee together and sell it to a wet mill. All right, the wet mill then takes possession of the coffee gets processed and stored and prepared for transport. The wet mill then sells the coffee to an exporting agent or to a warehouse or to another person. And then that's where it then gets sent to a shipping company. The shipping company's got to provide documents, and then the coffee gets sent to Australia. Once it arrives here, it has to get quarantined, checked by customs. Once it gets here, then it can get unloaded into our warehouse. So the actual chain of command is crazy. Other countries like Brazil, for example, some farms are highly commercialized in contrast with the Ethiopian farmers, which are little cooperatives. Incredible machinery. They pick, harvest, process the coffee. They do everything up to getting it on the boat. So dealing with different countries is so different.
Is that how it works in that country, or is that the experience that you've had with businesses in that country?
Again, even within each country, it's a little bit different, but we tend to deal with organizations that can provide us really sustainable and unique coffees. Moshe, who I spoke about earlier, he's the guy who has all of these relationships. And we deal with the same guys year on year on year because we've developed the relationships with them. It's not worth, I guess, just chopping and changing all the time, because it gives us an opportunity to see how coffee changes over time. It means that we can, for our customers, deliver them a product which, they can taste it this year and then go, I want that same coffee next year. Cool, we give it to them and we can go, look, the farmer had a bit of a frost. It's affected the quality in this way. So maybe you need to do this with your roasting a little bit. You know what I mean? We can provide information which not a lot of other importers can give to their customers. The level of information we can give is incredible because we're always in constant communication this way to the farmers and this way to our customers.
So I want to ask you about the future. But before we get onto that, you brought up some concepts from the past and about when we talked about coffee culture and history. In talking about the future, can you begin with sort of the evolution of coffee, sort of how it's come about, how it's evolved, how it exists today, and then we'll start talking about the future.
I wish I could do
That's
it as well as that. That's actually a big ask.
Question.
And I would actually just direct anyone listening to this podcast to a talk by a guy called James Hoffman.
Excellent.
He did a talk on the origins of coffee and how it moved out of Africa into other parts of the world, the journey that it took.
Fantastic.
James Hoffman is an incredible source of knowledge for coffee people. He's got a number of YouTube videos. He's done some podcasts, and he's got a book called The World Atlas of Coffee.
Awesome.
It's a massive book. It's an incredible resource. I would not be able to do as good a job as he does in explaining where coffees come from.
Yes.
But in a nutshell, coffee basically grew wild in the forests of Ethiopia and South Sudan. And then through Arab traders, it moved out of Ethiopia into the Yemen, where it was traded to the rest of the world. So coffee moved to things like the islands of Réunion and France, and somehow through missionary expeditions from France and England, missionaries carried coffee to a lot of parts of the world.
Wow.
But they never carried it for like mass cultivation. It was always just like a fascination that we take coffee and we start a small garden and there'll be coffee in the garden. You know what I mean? But it was never meant as a commercial crop. Some countries like I think it's El Salvador, they used to produce a crop called indigo, and indigo was used to make purple dyes. And then synthetic dyes came along, and so it killed the indigo production in El Salvador. So they turned to coffee as a new crop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's different stories in different countries of how coffee came about and how it ended up there.
Yes.
And how the production went.
I understand it's a huge question, and the reason that I like to have big questions is because I like guests to sort of have their spin on what their answer is to those questions. So thank you for providing that, even just your overview of how coffee might have evolved. I want to ask you now about innovations that have taken place in the industry that you've seen while you've been in the industry.
Again, it's a big question because I'm dealing on so many fronts. There's, I guess, the farming side, the agricultural side of things. There's a lot of innovations happening there. And then there's also the cafe side of things. And there's incredible innovations happening there. So maybe I'll tackle both.
Yes, please.
How much time have you got? I'm not sure. But,
lay it on.
So on the farming side, we're seeing a lot more engagement from farmers who used to go from just growing coffee the way that their grandfathers used to grow it and their great-grandfathers used to grow it. They're engaging more with people like us and the cafe side to say, what do people actually want? You know, how can we make our product better? And so they're looking at farming techniques. There's a massive push towards eco-friendly fertilizers and cultivation techniques that don't disrupt the natural environment. That's probably the biggest thing. So we're working with a couple of farms in Brazil that are using, I guess, they're not buying in pesticides and fertilizers anymore. They're mixing their own.
Okay.
So they have a second area where they mix I guess compounds together, soils and offcuts, and then they also grow bananas and other fruits. And if anyone knows anything about farming, crop rotation is important. Rotating crops around kind of is being worked into the idea, because if you just grow coffee year on year on year on year on year, you eventually deplete the soil. There's also a lot of experimentation, and this is what's really exciting for me, is new varieties of coffee.
Yes.
I guess the simple way to put this is, if you think of apples, there's green apples and there's pink apples and there's purple apples and there's all kinds of apples, and they all taste different. Same thing with coffee. There's different genetic varieties and they all have different characteristics. So a lot of farmers are starting to explore that now and develop hybrids that combat disease, that are drought resistant, that are really great for a certain flavor. You know what I mean? There's all these things happening. The most exciting one that I've come across is something called Laurina. This variety is a low caffeine plant, and it's a natural mutation that was discovered in, I think, Madagascar or one of the islands off Madagascar. It grows with very little caffeine. It's not decaffeinated. It grows naturally with low caffeine. It's being now produced in larger volumes and it's being made available, and you're going to start seeing it soon.
So it'll be a great decaf coffee. Is it decaf or low
Well,
caffeine?
it's low caff because you can't actually sell it as decaf because it hasn't been decaffeinated. The caffeine hasn't been removed. It just doesn't have caffeine. So it's a low caffeine coffee. Caffeine is by nature bitter.
Yes.
So if there's no caffeine in the coffee,
Sweet,
by nature it'll be very sweet, floral, it'll have some nice aromatics, and you'll taste no bitterness to it. It's a really interesting thing. And then I guess on the cafe front, there's incredible technologies being developed on, I guess, on the front of grinders and coffee machines and the way we actually brew coffee to get the very best we can out of these beans. Because there's so much happening on the farming side, we want to make the most of it. And people are asking questions now, like, in the past, coffee machines all used to be programmed to 94 degrees water temperature and 9 bars of pump pressure. And people are starting to ask, what happens if I turn it down to 6 bars? What if I take the temperature down to 86 degrees or 88 degrees? What happens? Does it make it better? You know, can I adjust my grinder to do a certain thing which you might not necessarily have been meant to do, but, you know, can you MacGyver it, basically?
And become a bit of a coffee scientist.
Yeah, it's not about what it does, it's about what you can make it do. And so there's a lot of experimentation going on both fronts, and that's really exciting. The farmers are asking the question, how can we make our product better? And then on the service side, we're going, hey, this is what we want. This is what's working in the market. This is what people are loving. Give us more of that. On both fronts, it's super exciting.
Very cool. I want to ask you, what changes do you want to see take place in the industry?
We need to add a third person into the equation. We've been saying the farmers are communicating and the baristas and the cafes we need to bring the consumers more into it. You know, right now the consumers are kind of being left out. They're still walking in going, I want a flat white. Not understanding that there's so much more to offer now with coffee. And it's silly, but we always make a wine analogy. Do you walk into a bottle shop and say, I just want wine? Or do you know what wine you want, what vintage you want, what, you know what I mean?
You'd hope
what
people, I hope people ask those questions.
For the most part.
Yeah.
That's representative of the wine drinking population.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There'll be the odd people who don't, but I would love for coffee consumers to be able to walk into a cafe and say, that's the one I want. I want that coffee from Ethiopia because I know what that's going to taste like, and that's what I want to experience today.
What about storing those beans in store? How long can you store those beans for? And are there systems and processes coming in that allows cafes to store them for longer?
Yeah. Well, this is another exciting thing that's happening is coffee, by virtue of the fact that it's roasted, degrades very quickly. Every case is a bit different, but normally you have about 30 days to use that coffee before it's stale. But people have been experimenting with freezing coffee now, to the point where you can have a coffee that's 6 months old, but because it's been frozen correctly, still tastes as good as the day it was roasted. But obviously you need good freezers for that and good management systems to keep track of what you've got.
Yes.
So there's a whole lot of evolution happening on that front.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, that might have to be something we explore in another episode. What's your creative process? So how do you come up with ideas? This is also a big question that I'm going to see where you go with. The first bit is, how do you come up with an idea, have that spark for an idea, then develop or entertain that idea, and then execute it?
Let me maybe speak to an example here. In some of the barista competitions I went into, we had to come up with a signature drink. This was a creative coffee drink, which was unique in some way, highlighted the flavors of the coffee, but was also, theatrical to some extent. This was like incredibly challenging when I first started out. And I was like, all right, how do I do this? How do I actually, get creative with something? And I had to really evaluate my own process a lot and come up with things that worked for me. So for me, I like to keep things simple and come up with a concept that I have in mind. For one particular drink, I wanted to do a cold, refreshing beer, but coffee inspired. And that idea was like, I was infatuated with it, but it couldn't be alcoholic because of the rules of the competition.
Okay.
But I wanted to simulate that experience of a hot day, cracking open a bottle and pouring out into a glass with a big foamy head, something that you can taste, something you can drink, and it's refreshing, revitalizing in some way. So I started down that. So that was a concept that I came up with. I said, I've got to make that happen. And then it's just trial and error from there. It's literally, okay, what do you need for beer? You need barley, you need hops, you need water. And then you need to add coffee into it.
Yes.
And then to some degree, what barley and what hops you use makes a big difference. What water you use. And I discovered all of this through the process. So
You
going,
use
okay,
yeast as well? Did you
I
obviously you
left the
couldn't
yeast
because of
out
the
actually because we
alcohol.
weren't allowed to ferment it.
Yeah.
But what I ended up using was a crystal barley because that had a really light flavor that complemented the flavor of the coffee I was using. But it also needed some sweetness. Through trial and error, you're going, this is good, but it needs some sweetness. So, all right, we need to add some sweetness in there. What are the characteristics of the coffee I'm using? The coffee I'm using had a very characteristic peach flavor to it. I thought, cool, let's bring some sweetness with some peach syrup. So I brewed up a peach syrup, combined that with the malted barley, added the coffee to it, put in a cream charger. Cream charger is making an appearance again to create the foam.
Yeah, cool.
And that was quite an experience. It probably took about 4 to 6 weeks to come out with something that I was happy with, of trial and error every day.
But to do that, like, I've heard people argue different things. And one is that you have to be very, very technically good at something to come up with ideas through that medium. And the other is that you can exercise creative thinking to come up with those ideas. And I think it's a bit of both. I think that you have to think abstractly and creatively and allow your mind to just flow into different areas of knowledge, pockets of knowledge that you have. But you do need to know the medium or the technical nature of whatever it is you're doing well enough to be able to go, oh, that wouldn't work or that would work with that particular thing.
I think you can draw experiences from other people in other industries, to be honest. For other drinks that I've created, I drew inspirations from chefs, in how they put together some of their, gels and things like that.
Yep.
We don't have to look inside our own industry. There's plenty of people out there that already have great knowledge and experience that we can draw on. So I've asked mixologists for help. I said, look, this is what I'm trying to create. I'm struggling with this element of the drink. Is there something in your trade and craft that can bring that element in? And they'll go, yeah, look, this is easy. This is what I do all the time. Or I know a guy. Or, chefs are incredible for that. Bartenders are incredible for that. And baristas are good at the coffee side of things. So,
yes.
We draw on everyone's experiences to some degree.
And something that a lot of that's come up on the show already and is coming up in future episodes. And that's something that I try to do through Hospopreneurs is cross-pollinate the industry so that I'm getting people to listen to other areas of the industry and draw that inspiration. So coffee can be listening to brewing. So Isaac Ryan has an earlier episode on the show. I can't remember the episode number at this time, but he mentioned to me he was looking at using different kinds of water and exploring the type of water input into the machine. And I connected him with another guest of mine who was in distilling, who obviously knows a lot about water because that's a lot of what they do in brewing and distilling. So they had a good little chat about it. But as far as I'm aware, I think they got in contact. Obviously, that's that concept about cross-pollinating the industry. I think there's a lot of value in talking to other people in the hospitality industry so that we can all grow.
I think it's something we in coffee don't always do that well. We sometimes get too cocooned in our own space and we forget there's a lot of other industries out there more well developed than ours. Take wine, for instance. Wine is running rings around coffee in terms of the way it delivers service and knowledge. So we can really take some cues from other industries and help use it to improve our own.
Yes, and there are pros and cons with all areas of hospitality. They've all got these strengths and weaknesses that by learning from and listening to other areas, we can take those things and grow together. So
That's right.
I'm loving being able to be part of that, which is really cool. I want to ask you, Ray, because you mentioned a resource before by James Hoffman. Do you have any other resources that you think are incredibly valuable for people in the hospitality industry?
Yeah, definitely. I've got a bunch, if you don't mind a bit of a list.
Of course.
So
Ray's pulled out a piece of paper here.
So there's a couple of online blogs that I read consistently. One is by James Hoffman. He's called Gym 7. That's the name of his blog. He's also a previous world barista champion, and he's been writing on coffee for many years. He talks about everything from coffee brewing to coffee service to how we can do things better. You know what I mean? He's an absolute visionary and a great writer. Some of his are nice and short, some of them are lengthier. But if you're in coffee, you need to read his blog. Then Scott Rao, he's written a number of books, but he also has his own blog. It's more coffee geeky kind of posts. It's more technical information on how to brew well, how to roast well, that kind of stuff. But very valuable resource. Then there's another blog by Barista Hustle. That's Matt Perger and his team. Really great resource. He had monthly blogs going out and now he's doing a lot more video and courses. So those are probably 3 blogs that I look at most.
Yep.
Then literature. Scott Rao's got some books out. He's got about 3 or 4 books out which are incredibly varied. There's some on brewing, some on extraction of coffee, some on roasting. He's got one for everyone pretty much, depending on what you're looking for. And in this industry, it's hard to find credible information. There's a lot of people out there just talking, you know what I mean, without real knowledge behind them. It's important to kind of go to credible resources, especially within coffee, to get to the bottom of something.
Yeah, that
to
core
get credible
foundational knowledge.
Because I found it incredibly frustrating when I was learning how much misinformation there was out there. You know, so finding credible information is a step in the right direction. There's so many books, some not even coffee related, which are going to be really valuable for our industry.
Yes,
like Simon Sinek's books.
Yep. Which ones? Start with Why.
Start with Why,
yeah.
And Together is Better. Those are highly applicable to our industry.
Yeah.
Things like Start with Why. You really need to get on board with that when you're starting your own cafe. Why am I doing this?
I've mentioned Start with Why several times in the show. What about other marketers or people who've jumped out at you? People like Gary Vaynerchuk, we've mentioned before, Seth Godin. Are these other guys that you...
Definitely. And Philip DeBella also has a book written about some of his principles. It's called Entrepreneurial Intelligence. If you want a copy, just get in touch with me and I'll happily organize one.
Yeah, just send us an email to the show and I'll organize that.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's a bunch of podcasts out there. There's a podcast called Tamper Tantrum. Really great.
I like that name.
Really great talks by well-credentialed professionals in the industry. The Cat and Cloud Coffee podcast is awesome. It's one of my favorites. It's a little bit of entertainment.
Yes.
But also very relevant. Like they talk a lot about service and how we can do things better and how we can challenge the way that we do things now to get better in the future. And then there's one called Keys to the Shop. That one is all about principles for running a good coffee business.
Awesome.
You know, so those are some of the resources that I look at. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry for the long list, but you know,
There's a
I
lot
think
in
in this
there.
industry, you have to be hungry for knowledge. And
Absolutely.
if you consume knowledge, then you know you're going in the right direction.
Yes, I'll put everything in the show notes as well. So you're probably madly writing things down there at home, but I'll put them in the show notes so you have those resources and you can just click straight through. So I want to ask you, Ray, what's your biggest challenge right now?
My biggest challenge right now probably is time management. Like, there's so much I want to do and so much I hope to do in and around coffee and community and building the way that we do coffee here. I just need to figure out how to prioritize what to do first. You know, I'd love to get more involved with cafe owners and talk about how we can deliver coffee better, how we can deliver better customer experiences to people, how we can reshape what we do now so that we're relevant 5 years from now. I'd also love to be more involved on the farm side. You know, I want to get to know our producers better. I want to get to know the challenges that they're having and how we can help them. I'm a little bit torn between two worlds right now.
I've got a quick note to ask about on-demand food. Is on-demand food affecting cafes as much as it's affecting nightlife?
Are you talking about the emergence of like Uber Eats,
Uber
and
Eats
these
and
kinds of
Foodora
things?
and Deliveroo and those guys.
I don't know of anyone who's doing coffee deliveries that well. I think that's part of what I said before. We need to be relevant 5 years from now.
Yes.
If on-demand food is taking food to people, what's the need to come into a cafe? We need to, as an industry, develop ourselves to keep people wanting to come back. And that's by being more entertaining, by being more engaging, by creating emotional engagement with our brands and with our cafes. We can't stand still, you know, because there's all of these disruptive businesses coming in and shaking up the way the world works that, you know, we can't stand still.
I'm totally with you because that's what I'm passionate about discussing. I love asking about what the future holds with hospitality tech and with technology, even with it, whether it's innovations with social media, how social media is affecting the game, or more technical innovations with how to actually produce the product, or if it's on the back end, on, you know, paddock to plate, the whole process. My last question for you, Ray, is what is the next step for Ray?
This is an interesting one because I'm kind of in the process of figuring that out for myself at the moment. I've spent a lot of years working up to this point right now, and now I'm here. I'm in massive learning mode, and I think based on my learning, I'll be able to decide the next step. You know what I mean? It's not something that I take lightly. 5 years ago, I set out to be involved in coffee importing, but to do that, there was a lot of learning that needed to happen. So now I'm here. I'm going to do some more learning. I'm going to figure things out. I'm leaning towards dismantling coffee the way we do it and developing a new way, a new system of creating engagement for people. I'm not sure how to do that yet, but that's in the works. That's on my mind right now.
I'm very excited by that answer. I'm looking forward to it. Well, let's stay in the loop, Ray. It's been awesome to have you on the show today, and I can't wait to have a chat with you again soon.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Stay in touch with the show after hours at Hospopreneurs on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Creativity and innovation in hospitality. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson. Sound like tomorrow. Sweet as sound. What does tomorrow sound like? Let's show you.